description explains what happened. This cemetery, it's called Hampstead Cemetery, but I live in West Hampstead because Hampstead Cemetery, St. John at Hampstead, it got rather full, so they needed more cemeteries. And it opened in the 1860s, this one in Fortune Green Road. And it's a 20-minute walk from my house. So beginning of lockdown, what can you do? You can go for a walk and exercise. So if I tell you that it's a 25-acre site with 60,000 graves, I've left a few out, but I'm going to tell you about most of the graves.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. I mean, I literally spent hours there, but I've picked a few sort of diverse stories of people there. It's multi-denominational, non-denominational, and as you go in, you go from Fortune Green Road and you walk up and you see these wonderful neo-Gothic chapels. The one on the left, which is the one on the south side, was originally for the Anglican burials, and the one on the right was for non-denominational. They are not used for that purpose anymore. There are no more burials there. Rather beautiful entrance here. It's cut in two halves. There's an ancient footpath that crosses it in the middle. Ooh, isn't that beautiful? Beautiful, stunning. It takes up a wonderful plot inside the cemetery. A lovely triangular spot just on a corner. Fabulous Art Deco piece of monument to Bianchi. Who's the Bianchi here? Well, fantastical story. It starts with Cesare Bianchi, born near Lake Como in Italy. Italian boy, quite ambitious, comes to London, does lots of odd jobs, but then the war starts and he has to go back to Italy. But he's determined to make his way. And he's Italian. So he comes back to Aberdeen initially, and he's working in a hotel up in Aberdeen, like many Italians, working in London, working in the UK. He was in the restaurant trade. And while he was there, he met the love of his life, Martha, or Mattie. Scottish girl, her name was Gal. And they are together up in Aberdeen, but he's doing quite well, but there's only so far he can go at the hotel. And he decides, no, we're going to go to London. And they come to London and he gets a job at the Cafe Royal, which is still there to this day. He comes and they've got married in 1921 and they have a daughter, Patricia, who comes with them. So he's working at the Cafe Royal. He works his way up to becoming the head chef at the Cafe Royal. So he was obviously pretty good at his job. They actually lived in Hampstead, in Lawn Road, if anybody knows it. But sadly, in 1936, this is my tragedy story, as Abba said. 1936, Martha was giving birth to their second child, a boy called Robert. Robert survived, but sadly, Mattie died in childbirth. And that's how come we have this amazing monument to his wife. So Mattie's sister, Martha's sister, Mary, comes down from Scotland to help Cesare carry on working and look after the two children, Patricia and Robert. But 1939, war breaks out. He's Italian. So we have another sad story coming up here, because along with a lot of Germans and Italians, he's taken away as an alien. And he is taken up to Liverpool to board the Arandora Star. You may know it. It was a ship that was bound for Newfoundland in Canada. It set sail on the 2nd of July, 1940. There was 1,300 prisoners, such as they were. technically prisoners, on board, German and Italian. But they'd barely gone out into the Atlantic, just beyond Ireland, and a German U-boat spots them. They were just about to turn around to reload their munitions, but they still had one weapon left. Torpedo on board, commander goes, fire it. And the Arandora Star was hit, and the explosion killed everyone in the ship's engine room, caused the ship obviously to sink really rapidly. And Bianchi was one of more than 700 Italian prisoners that had been on the ship, 600 Germans. 2/3 of the Italians drowned. But somehow he survived. So this is a romanticized close-up here of Cesare and Martha sitting on a park bench, cradling the son she never got to cradle. This is Martha and an older Cesare here. Now, if anybody knows the Italian church on Clerkenwell Road, it is the most stunning, stunning Catholic church, very high church, St. Peter's. And if you go there, they actually have these memorials to the Italians.
Rhona Levene.
Pardon? Oh, sorry. I thought somebody had a question. So, you know, if you go there, I mean, it's well worth a visit, actually. And they have these memorials that you see here, the Arandora Star. And it has a list of the names of the people who lost their lives. And on the right-hand side there, there's an article from the Liverpool Daily newspaper. And at the very bottom, I don't know if you can see, the list of rescued includes Andre Gualdi and Nario Chazani, partners in the Monsignor restaurant, who used to run the Embassy Club, Luigi Vergiano, late chef at Quaglino's, Cesare Bianchi, head chef at the Cafe Royal. And then other well-known names in the list, Dr. Riccardo Vici Borghese, the gynecologist, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, he was a noted person in the restaurant trade at the time. So he has survived. But what do? They send him to the Isle of Man, to an internment camp. And he stays there until December 1942. And here's his card that he's issued when he is released from the Isle of Man, internment card. You can see the dates there. So he's now back in London. He's been away a long time. He can't really get his job back at the Cafe Royal. And he finds work at Smithfield Market. And that is not how it was when he went there, but it was on the 8th of March, 11:30 in the morning, in 1944, a V2 bomb hit it. I mean, it completely went in, punched the floor, exploded, went into the Underground Railway tunnels. I mean, a complete mess. 110 people died. And really, really sadly, I mean, this isn't bad enough. He's survived, you know, he's lost his wife. He's survived the Arandora Star explosion, but he didn't survive Smithfield. But his sister-in-law was there shopping that day. They'd had a new delivery of rabbits, and a lot of housewives had turned up that day to buy them, and she lost her life the same day. Cesare's buried in, oops, giving away there. Cesare's buried in Hampstead Cemetery, obviously. But I've shown you. So now we've gone from a lovely Catholic Italian boy to a Jew, but not a Jew. Alan Corrin, the writer, editor of Punch magazine, a real wit, quite a wag by people who knew him. But he had no interest in being part of the Jewish community. And in fact, I know that when he died, Bushey, which is a very large Jewish cemetery, wanted to have him buried there. They like having a few Jewish celebrities in this cemetery. No, no way. The instructions were Hampstead Cemetery. He didn't engage with being Jewish at all. And in fact, in an interview in The Independent, he said, I haven't been Jewish for years. So I really like this very, very plain tombstone for him, but the beautiful etching of Punch sitting there in his chair, and tomorrow to fresh woods and Crickles New, because in fact, the family lived in Cricklewood, just a little bit further north from West Hampstead. And just to relate it to the City of London, I don't know if anybody is aware of the Punch table. So this is a very famous table where there were dinners, and you had to be invited to the dinners. They started off at 6 o'clock, and there were all sorts of dignitaries. Some of the staff were invited, but it was a social gathering to discuss ideas, mostly to discuss what cartoons were going to appear in Punch magazine. When Punch magazine eventually closed in 2002, after Mohammed Al-Fayed took it over for a few years, they'd been in Bouverie Street, so just off Fleet Street. He had acquired the archives and this table. And the British Library now has the archives and the table and the Punch statue that stood outside the offices. As far as I'm aware, they have yet to find large enough space to display this table. But if you have a quick skim around, you can see some extraordinary names. You've got royals, the Duke of Edinburgh's there, Prince Charles is there, and they were invited to scratch their names on the table, which, although William Makepeace Thackeray did actually write a poem called The Mahogany Table about the Punch table. It's not mahogany, it's a cheap wood. So they were all invited to scratch their names on the table. And in fact, when Mark Twain was invited, he said, oh, my initials are already there with William Makepeace Thackeray. Part of my initials are already there anyway, so he didn't bother. Now, leaving the Jewish guy, we have another Jewish-born actress. Now, can you see her name in the middle there, Lily Palmer? It's not actually her grave. At the entrance to the cemetery, there's a plan of notables. And they're very careful. They don't actually say notable burials, because she's not buried here. She's out in Hollywood. And, but this is the burial spot for her mother there, Rosal Pizer. They were from Poznan, Germany, now Poland. And her father, Dr. Alfred, died in 1934. So Mum, her 3 daughters, come to London. And she was quite an enterprising woman, because she opened up across the road from Hampstead Cemetery, Parsifal Road. I love this, Rosemount boarding house, but it was a boarding house with culture. Anybody know what that means? I don't know. Maybe this was the culture. These girls were living there, the daughters. And this is a double page spread from magazine in 1941, 9th of April, 1941. It was from the Tatler. And it mentions that Lily is playing the would-be inspirer of a handsome, she's in no time for comedy at the Haymarket Theatre. And her younger sister, Hildy, is in a new review called Orchids and Onions, never heard of it, at the Comedy Theatre, of the one that's now called the Harold Pinter Theatre. So they were a theatrical family, because the older sister, Irene, was a singer, but she gave that up when she had twins, to concentrate on her family. And you can see on the bottom right there, the 2 girls are playing table tennis. So it seems that Lily was also a European champion table tennis player, girl of many talents and a great beauty. And she was appearing on stage in the 1950s with her future husband, Rex Harrison, Bell, Book and Candle. So that was her first husband, the great Rex Harrison. And in fact, Rex Harrison came to London and directed this play at the Phoenix Theatre on Charing Cross Road in 1954. They got married in 1943, but they divorced in 57. But it was a really amicable divorce because he wanted to marry Kay Kendall, who was very sick, ailing, near to death. And in fact, Lily was already involved with her Argentinian actor husband to be Carlos Thompson. But when Lily Palmer died in 1986, as I say, she's in California, Forest Lawn Memorial Park. At Rex Harrison's request, when he died 4 years later, a portion of his ashes was scattered on her grave. So clearly an amicable divorce. This man, oh my. So I used to go past this and I thought, oh, you know, baronet, what? Go away. Let's research who this man is. I'll try to keep it short because he was amazing. Sir Arthur Pearson, Sir Cyril Arthur Pearson, newspaper magnate, publisher and founder of the Daily Express newspaper, it says. Very ambitious. He won a competition and got himself a job as a clerk with a new type of popular newspaper called Titbits. Now, it's not the Titbits that's around these days, which is a rather saucy magazine. This was not like that at all. And he worked his way up to becoming a manager. He was very successful. 1890, started a number of other papers. 1900, he bought the Daily Express for a halfpenny. 1904, he bought the Standard, an Evening Standard. And by 30 years of age, he was the owner of a company with a capital of £400,000. That's in 1904. But he had glaucoma and he went blind in 1914. But this was not going to stop him. He actually told his wife that he was never going to be a blind man. He was going to be the blind man. And the following year, he set up a hostel for blind servicemen, initially in Bayswater, and then Otto Kahn, an American financier, offered his house in Regent's Park, St. Dunstan's Lodge. And here, the nurses and inmates are cheering in the grounds of St. Dunstan's Lodge, which still exists to this day in Regent's Park. You can't go in it, it's a private residence. I'll tell you who owns it now. But you may notice that clock, very prominent clock. If you remember on the invitation that Paul sent round to you, there was a picture of St. Dunstan's in the West, which is a church on Fleet Street. The church came from there. It was rescued by a former owner of St. Dunstan's Lodge. And it was there in the grounds with Gog and Magog. You can see in the little alcove above, now restored back to the church on Fleet Street. But then, you know, 1920, Otto Kahn actually said, you know what, I want St. Dunstan's back. And so they relocated, actually practically next door, to St. John's Lodge, another mansion. And it's that one, St. John's Lodge, that you can go and sit in the, sorry, I made an error there. St. Dunstan's was demolished, but St. John's Lodge still exists, and the gardens are beautiful, very, very tranquil, almost like a secret garden in Regent's Park. Now, the owner is Prince Geoffrey, the Sultan of Brunei's brother. Bit of a playboy. Remember Sir Arthur Pearson working for Titbits? Do you think Prince Geoffrey heard of that story? That's why he named his super yacht Tits? Ah, dear me. The son called Prince Geoffrey a sex-crazed prince got into a very lot of trouble. Now, here you can see 1,500 people turned up at Sir Arthur Pearson's cemetery as funeral. And can you see VOB on the top of the wreath there on the right-hand side with the scouts? That's victory over blindness. That was kind of his motto. And here you can see all the people crowding round for his 1921 funeral. But that brings me to the end of my presentation. There's a lot of other people. Here's a few. Unbelievably, Joseph Lister, not buried in Westminster Abbey, that they wanted to do that. He said, no, I'd like to be buried with my wife, please. Kate Greenaway, children's book illustrator. Mari Lloyd. Now, Mari Lloyd, interestingly, superstar of the music hall, her funeral attracted, let me check how many people. She kind of outdid poor old Pearson. For her funeral, there were 50,000. So there were 1,500 for Sir Arthur Pearson, 50,000. She was absolutely superstar. So much so that the cemetery actually had to operate a one-way for the funeral cortege and for all the mourners. They opened a new set of gates, which aren't there anymore. So you had to go in, follow around, go to the graveside, and then come out another way. Because obviously this was planned. They knew roughly how many people were likely to turn up. Albert Eustace and Horace Leonard Short, the Short brothers are aeronautical engineers. Peggy Duff, CND campaigner. William Goscombe John, a sculptor. One of his most famous pieces is the one to Sir Arthur Sullivan on Victoria Embankment. Beautiful one. When I say Gilbert and Sullivan, so Sullivan. Andrew Fisher, surprisingly, 5th Prime Minister of Australia, is buried there. Born in Ayrshire, but he actually was here as High Commissioner for Australia and died here. And his friends put up a rather wonderful monument for him. Dame Gladys Cooper, another wonderful British actress. Sir Charles Wyndham, yes, he who built Wyndham's Theatre. And he's buried with both of his wives. First wife, Emma, died in 1916, married his second wife in 1916, and they're both buried there. But he wasn't having an affair. It was, they were friendly, and his second wife was an actress that worked in many of his theatre. Sticking with theatre, Harry Broadrib Irving and his wife. Harry Irving is the son of Sir Henry Irving. And Harry and Dorothea were actors, and there was only one time they actually appeared on stage together for an actors benevolent. And this is one of my favourites. I had to crawl over like sort of overgrown graves to find Arthur Prince's grave. So Arthur Prince was a ventriloquist, and when he was buried, his dummy Jim is buried with him. And in fact, on the tombstone, it lists Arthur Prince, Jim, and then the wife. Possibly because that's the order, and she died much later than Arthur and Jim. And in fact, interestingly, Arthur Prince actually appeared at the Royal Variety Show the year that Mari Lloyd was not invited to be part of the show. And she was nose was out of joint, probably a bit saucy for the show, but he did attend her funeral. Come, I'll take you around.
It's amazing.
I did.
That must have taken you hours.
To do what?
Find all those gravestones and sort out the ones that were of interest.
Oh, the ones I haven't told you about.
The other 59,990.
Thank you. Okay, same time next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fascinating.
St Dunstan's continues to this day down on the south coast.
Yes, absolutely.
It's down there.
Yes.
Both my father and my mother were Dunstan. I think they called them Dunstonians, didn't they?
Yeah,
Yeah, they
yes.
did.
Yeah, because they took the name
Yeah.
from their first, proper home, as it were. Yeah. Wonderful.
Well, St Dunstan's in the west there is matched by St Dunstan's in the east.
Yes.
It's just down by Waterman's Hall, or near Waterman's Hall.
It's extraordinary. It kind of, if you stand inside the ruins of St Dunstan's in the east, it looks like Thunderbirds Will Go, one of their rockets. If you look at it, it's an amazing place.
That's right, yeah. And of course, the St Dunstan's in the west is the one of the bounds that are beaten by the parish of St Bride's.
So, yes. And I think it actually is one of the city churches that now has Chinese congregation using it.
Oh, right.
Yeah, pretty sure. So.
I always remember St Dunstan's with that famous quote in David Niven's autobiography. There was a famous actor who quoted the wisdom of David Niven that he applauded, and I can't remember who it was now. I think it was somebody like Jack Nichols, and he said that he'd heard David Niven was with a grandson or something, and there was two dogs, a bitch and a dog on the top. And the grandson sort of said, "Oh, uncle, what are they doing?" And he said, he drew breath and said, "Oh, well, the first dog's blind and the second one's showing him the way to St Dunstan's."
Really? That's very good.
It's in the book. It's in the last paragraph.
What was it? Something moon.
Moon's a balloon.
Moon's a balloon.
Moon's a balloon. It's a lovely biography.
Bring on the empty horses.
Sorry?
The other one he wrote was Bring on the Empty Horses.
That's right, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have to say, I have a very good recollection of St Dunstan's personally. I went to prep school in Rottingdean, where St Dunstan's was.
That's it.
Us nasty little boys used to say, "What a stunning view."
Oh!
Unfortunately, nobody in St Dunstan's can see it.
Yeah.
It's really nasty. It does have a wonderful view over the sea.
Yeah.
Rhona, do you know now who the cemetery is looked after by? Because it's non-denominational and it's in need of a lot of TLC. It's not a good place.
It's Hampstead and Islington Council. So it's kind of part of the borough, London
There's
Borough.
a problem, isn't there?
It's Camden and Islington together.
Yes. As it's full now, it's a problem as to who looks after it, isn't it?
Yeah, but they do have council workers. And in fact, I could show you, but so when lockdown started, Camden, like various other boroughs, wanted to close down public spaces because people were gathering in large numbers. And they closed Hampstead Cemetery just for a couple of days. I mean, intentionally, they were going to close it for the whole time. But a lot of us that were going there, finding great tranquility and peace there, it was so vast. There were never very many people there. So a group of volunteers approached the councils and said, if we can get people together to open and close it every day, will you let us do it? So I was one of the volunteers closing, and I actually got to ring a bell, going around making sure everybody had left the cemetery at night and locking the gates. So yeah, but then they took over responsibility, and they mostly are looking after maintaining it. There's a very beautiful war memorial there, where there's a company coming up from coming down from Yorkshire, stonemasons who are cleaning up the names, you know, sort of carving them out again. So, you know, it's still active in that way.
Good.
You mentioned Sir Ian Fraser, who was chairman of St Dunstan's, as I recall, and he went to the same prep school as I did. I was head boy. And,
Well, the same as Richard.
but that was some years later.
Yeah. And Rhona, I don't know if this is a personal thing, but did you know my sister-in-law, Eva Abrahams, who was a city guide?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Because she lived.
Is
Eva,
it Dee speaking?
No,
it's Jenny Nathan.
Where are you?
She's behind Michael Nathan.
it's very difficult to get us both on here. But
Oh, you're there.
There's
Yeah.
Jenny.
yes,
No, I'm sorry, I don't. And in fact, I mean,
she lived in Achilles Road.
Oh,
Yes,
around
nearly
the corner from the
on
cemetery.
the corner. And she died, unfortunately, and is buried in Hampstead Cemetery with her parents. They came from Romania. They all came from Romania.
Oh,
But,
God, now I'm going to have to go and find the grave.
It's quite hard to find them. It's well worn, shall we say, the place. Yes, I'll come with you one day. We'll try and find it.
You're on.
Okay.
We've got to
Rhona.
go, so thank you very much.
Thank
We've got to
you.
go.
Nice to
Rhona,
meet you,
where
Edna.
do they keep the plans for the cemetery, for the graves? Where are they kept?
Got the registers.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe it's in Islington. I
Mhm.
think it's the Islington archives have got it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Because when I was trying to research, you know, you walk around and you see names and it's like interesting names, familiar names, you know, when I was trying to, you know, research and stuff, but obviously you can't get in anywhere at the moment. But yeah, Islington.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There must be some more music hall people up there, I would have thought.
Well, we've got Arthur Prince and Mary Lloyd. Well, yeah.
I mean, Mary Lloyd was very, very famous.
Ellen Terry's two brothers are buried there. I mean, you know, there's a lot of theatre people buried there.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot. Sculptors. Not so many artists as you get in St John's at Hampstead. But more of the entertainers. I mean, there's a wonderful guy who ran the Blue Post pub in the city. Was not a musical person, but his grave is it's an organ. It's wonderful organ that his friends put up for him, and nobody really knows why. He liked music. He never played the organ. He wasn't an organist. Extraordinary stuff in there.
When was the last body buried there?
I knew you were going to ask me that. Well, I mean, I would think it's Alan Corrin, actually, and I don't quite know how that happened because they stopped much earlier, you know, in the 1920s, 1930s, really.
So nothing's been buried there since then. Good Lord.
Well, but Alan Corrin is only 2007.
I'm sorry, Rhona, that's quite wrong because my sister-in-law died 5 years ago.
Oh, there you go. But I think the way it works usually with cemeteries, if you've booked a place, so you know, if you've already got paid for a plot.
Not as old as that, though. Not as
Which
long
cemetery
ago.
are we talking of?
Yeah, Hampstead, wherever is, and her
Was
parents.
did you say her husband's buried there as well?
No, her parents.
Oh, her parents. Well, maybe
That's why.
because the parents are there, there is leeway.
No, only about 10 years before. I mean, really, they.
Oh, wow.
That long ago. It's not that. It's 1980s. 1980s.
Rhona, I found out you did say, but when was the cemetery first used?
18, and you knew somebody would ask me. Let me just double check.
Wherever's buried, I think.
18, I think it's 1876.
Yeah, so not in use for a great length of time, really, then.
No, not really.
Yeah.
But I mean, because of the, you know, the rules, the health and safety rules of burials
Yes,
in London and stuff, you know.
that's right. What
Yeah.
normally happens is that if you, in those days at least, you bought the plot
Yes,
and it belongs to the family. We have this with my in-laws,
I wonder.
and we've now, it's been transferred to my stepdaughter, the ownership. So at least she can say what happens to it for another 60 years or so before it has to be transferred
Not
somewhere
sure
else.
if it is the same. I don't know how Alan Corrin got in,
Yeah,
because there's no
he
family.
obviously knew someone.
Just him. I think so. Somebody knew somebody. I think so. Yeah. So he was Jewish after all. Sorry, I'm allowed to say that. Yeah.
So his name was Cohen, that's why.
Yeah.
The
Do you
Rothschild.
ever do anything down in southeast London, Rhona?
I don't. Well, I did a walk a couple of weeks ago. I started at Bermondsey Station and ended up in Rotherhithe.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, because
The,
it was
up
it's
at
made stuff.
up at Brockley, or between Brockley and
So,
Peckham, there's a rather large cemetery, and it has a very similar chapel arrangement
oh,
in the
really?
middle, but it was disused for a long time.
Okay.
And I think I was probably one of the only coppers still alive who arrested someone for grave robbing.
Really?
Yeah,
That's extraordinary.
juveniles, and they'd taken a skull,
To
which
do
had come to the surface, and put a couple of exhaust pipes in it, like a Viking helmet.
what?
But,
Oh, so
yeah.
they were just being mischievous.
Oh yeah, that's it. But,
They weren't selling it to a doctor at
oh no. But, you know,
You're not that old, Tony,
when the
are you?
sergeant tried looking it all up, he was having a great deal of trouble finding the child book. Yeah, and because that cemetery is alongside the old medieval road from London down into Kent, which went across at Catford, and it's the cemetery. There's a path called Brockley Footpath that goes up and across there, and then crosses the railway by a pub called the Brockley Jack, which is a very old one. And he was a highwayman who had his hideout in what is now Peter Pan's pool on the Bromley Road at Catford.
How funny.
Which was marshland in those days.
How do you know all that? Are you from that area or just?
Well, no, I was a copper around there, so you know,
Okay.
after a while you get a bit bored night duty, so you have a look and try and find things out. I can tell you a bit about Deptford as well.
I trained a former policeman to be a
Sorry?
Camden tour. I taught people for 3 years to be Camden tour guides, and we had one guy on the course who was a retired policeman. He had the best stories. The best stories. Absolutely fantastic, because he was on the beat around King's Cross area, so he had some wonderful stories. Really, really good. Yeah.
I dare say one or two of them might even have been true.
I can vouch for policemen having good stories because I'd booked to go on a tour around Nottingham Lace Market, the area, and our tour guide didn't turn up, but the local police sergeant did. And so then he took the group of us round where all the murders had taken place, and where the last person to be hung in Nottingham was hung. And you cannot fault the police force for being able to come to the rescue of a band of maidens.
Well, we learn to think on our feet when we have to speak. It comes from standing in number 1 court in the witness box at the Old Bailey with the wrong pocketbook.
Oh.
Got away with it.
I'm watching a series on Amazon Prime at the moment. Don't know if anybody's got that. Goliath?
No.
With Billy Bob Thornton, who's a lawyer, you know, and he's a bit of a, he's kind of, he's straight, but he's, you know, he's got interesting methods of getting evidence and stuff like that. Fabulous series.
Oh, it's
I
good.
mean, I just watched series 1. I think I've probably got 3 or 4 to go.
Does anybody know if we can get hold of a series that was on, I think, BBC 2 some years ago called City of Vice?
God, I
It
remember.
was a story, basically, it was the story of the Fielding brothers and the Bow Street Runners, how they set them up. And it was absolutely riveting. It was very, very close to the truth, I think.
I'm
Fantastic
looking it up
series.
now. British drama series. Is it available anywhere?
Oh,
Doesn't look like Channel 4. I wonder if you can get it.
I have just recently watched the BBC series Harlots, which was quite fascinating.
Oh yeah, I've not watched it.
no.
It was quite a bit fruity in places, but it was quite fascinating.
You have to pay them, and I'm afraid I was conceived in Scotland. So, you know.
I know you couldn't afford it, Tony. It's a shame, really.
You know what you pay me, Master. Occasionally.
Yeah.
Hopefully he's on furlough.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you were referring to the professional that the ladies wear.
Tony,
Can't see it.
City of Vice was a Channel 4 production.
Oh, right.
Yes, but there
So-
is for.
It's on Amazon UK.
It's on Amazon. You can get it on
Oh,
Amazon.
is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
On Amazon Prime then, Prime Video.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, I haven't got that.
Too much to watch.
You can get it as a DVD as well, Tony, if you want it.
Yeah, I might well do, because I thoroughly enjoyed those.
Yeah, that's
And-
on Amazon.
You know, it's part of the history of policing. It's a sort of transition from the Beadle
Yeah.
to the police force
Yeah.
via the Bow Street Runners.
The Bow Street Runners, yes.
Well, the Robin Redbreast, as they called them, didn't they?
Oh, right.
And of course, Fieldings were.
Henry Fielding was involved.
Tony,
Yes.
I think we have to book you for an evening of stories.
Hi, Tom.
I think it sounds as though it would be a good.
Of course.
The reference to people and the forces being helpful to people, I always remember a friend of mine taking her grandson to the Tower of London when one of the beefeaters went up to her young grandson, who I think at that time was all of 7 years old, and said, "Would you please hang on to your grandma, because we lose at least 3 grandmas a day."
I don't know whether I should reveal this. I took the boys to the NIT clinic at Hampstead, and a kind policeman came up and spoke to Jamie and put his helmet on his head.
Oh,
So we don't know how many police force had NITs that week.
Oh dear.
Amazing.
He's very well, by the way. He sends his regards to everybody.
Yeah,
We
he's
Oh,
certainly
great
can.
stuff.
Oh, lovely.
Thinking back on what Tony said, of course, the wheel has turned full circle and we're back with the Beadle.
Well, if I ever did write my life story, I suppose I could call it A Career in Regression.
Well, you better write it. We don't want to read it.
Oh,
You-
yeah, but Beatles never did know how to write. That's why we had clerks.
Very true.
there's only one Paul.
Yes, quite.
I missed the last one.
Back to you, Paul.
He does a better job than I ever could. I know that. Oh.
I have to say, I wondered whether, Rhona, you've done a similar exercise on Highgate Cemetery.
I mean,
No, I haven't actually
no, it was just
become a guide at Highgate Cemetery. It's on the list of things to do. I've just volunteered for Willesden Jewish Cemetery. That is just opening a new centre called House of Life, talking about, because that's another one to go around. I mean, the people buried in Willesden Jewish Cemetery is like, you know, the who's who of British, well, not, well, kind of British Jewry, if you like, you know, they're all there. You've got Rothschilds, you've got sort of, you know, all the bankers, the artists, the lot. So, so that's Willesden. I'm looking to volunteer there. But Highgate, I went recently because they've started doing this, just an experiment, letting people roam without having to go around with a guide.
Without a guide?
Yes. They
Well,
just, because for a long time they sort of said it was too dangerous because it's, you know, a lot of the graves are falling over. Well, you should see the one in Hampstead. You know, looks like people are trying to climb out. But, you know, so they are just letting people, they're handing out, I think, a map so that the key people, if you like, you can go and find, but they're letting people just go and wander around at the moment. So that's on the list to go and do as well. See if I can, I'll count how many graves there are there. I think there's more. There's something like 120,000, I think, in Highgate, because you've got two sides there as well.
Well, I'd say I went to Highgate Cemetery many years ago, and I found it absolutely fascinating with the names of people who one had heard of and had wonderful reputations, or in some cases not so wonderful reputations.
Yeah.
I went to the following year the wonderful cemetery in Paris.
Père
Lachaise.
Yeah.
Indeed, incredible there as well, and some of the mausoleums are just out of this world.
Yeah. Well, I think Highgate based themselves, I think they tried to be like Père Lachaise. I think that was their model.
Well, understandably.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems a funny thing to spend one's time walking around cemeteries.
I know.
But they are so interesting.
I mean, I have been going around. I've done Paddington Old Cemetery just during lockdown, are the ones that are near me. Paddington Old Cemetery, where Michael Bond, who wrote Paddington Bear, is buried there. And there's always at least one little toy bear on his tombstone. It's lovely, and not the same. People just go along and plonk them on. So, you know, Paddington Old Cemetery, you know, Hampstead, Highgate, been doing all the cemeteries. What's that meant?
No, but I mean, it tells you so many stories, and it sows a seed to go and investigate.
Absolutely. Oh, completely. I've come back today. I actually wandered up there again today just to feel it. And I found another one who I'm going to go away and research. The name looks really, really, I don't know, interesting, familiar.
Did you ever find out what happened to Cesare Bianchi's
children? Well, Patricia is buried there as well.
So that's the daughter?
Yes.
And what about the son?
The son is still alive, as I think.
Good Lord.
Yeah, well, because he was born 1936.
Yeah, so he'd be quite elderly.
86 now.
Yeah, but I know that he has helped other people who've researched his father's story. He has, you know, wanted to share his father's story quite recently, so he's still
I wonder if he went into the hospitality industry like his father was in.
I don't think he did.
Oh, right, okay.
No, because it's like sort of, I've had people go, oh, is he the Cesare Bianchi? Did his son run Bianchi's? There was a Bianchi restaurant, I think,
yes, there was.
in Hampstead or something. And it's like, no, sadly, I wish I could say it was, but it's not.
But I mean, the Café Royal in itself is absolutely steeped in stories and history.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, some of the most outrageous events and parties were held there particularly in the 20s and the 30s.
Yeah.
If you start,
but also, even during the Second World War.
Oh yes, you know, and of course you've got the famous Windmill Theatre that was started, that developed that became a 24-hour theatre.
Mm.
And the interesting thing is, you met Jo Correll, didn't you? My friend Joanna Correll? No, well, her grandfather was, of course, the original Jo Correll of Correll's Bookmakers.
Oh, right, okay.
So her father was Bernard Correll, and Bernard went to school with the Winters brothers and Bruce Forsyth. Bruce Forsyth's first wife and Bernard Correll's first wife were Windmill Girls.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
And of course, they were all at school together. And then latterly, the Correll family bought the Wigan Pen Club, and that was the administrative head office for Bernard and his charitable work that he did. And he was chairman, I was president of the Variety Club, Marsden Hospital Children's Cancer Wing, which they built. And he was also president of the Variety Club Golfing Society. And I mean, the monies that they raised for charity were just phenomenal overall. But I mean, even in the 60s, 70s, they'd been through the quagmire of things. But I mean, old man Correll, who'd come from Eastern Europe, I mean, he was paralyzed down one side. And Joe tells the story of him confronting the famous brothers from the East End that served time.
Cray brothers.
The Cray brothers, yes.
Them.
And it was quite funny because my cousin's husband did their mother's funeral at Chingford Mount.
Mm.
We've also
The wicked one.
the Forte family, Charles and Rocco.
Forte?
The Fortes are all buried at Hampstead as well.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
I mean, Charlie Forte's story is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was a leading pioneer of the hotel and hospitality industry.
And Rocco still is.
Originally being an ice cream man.
Yeah. My first job in London was working for Trust House Forte Leisure. When my boss used to book the acts for the end of the Pier Theatre. And so I was his secretary or whatever it was called in those days. And the acts, the turns would come in to go and talk to him, audition, whatever. And they used to do their shows. They would come in, I had fire eaters, contortionists doing their acts for me whilst they waited to go in and see David. Fantastic job.
Oh,
absolutely amazing. Amazing.
I have a friend up in Whetstone, and her father and his mother was actually a showgirl, again Windmill, but her father was the biggest theatrical agent in the West End in the early 20s, 30s. And they employed nearly 50 staff doing the administration, supplying acts to all the theatres in the West End.
What name was that? Can you remember?
I can't remember what the surname is now. Obviously, she's in a married name, but I mean, if ever you wanted to talk to her, because she's got all the history all documented. Her parents, before her father died, they lived in Temple Fortune.
Oh, right, okay.
And they got a flat there. And the mother ended up at Brinsworth,
Okay.
which is down the road to me.
And has anybody written their biography, or is she going to do that?
I keep saying that she should commit it to print, but I don't know that she has. But I mean, she's got a lot of the old billboards and the posters and all of those sort of things with the names on, you know, the production companies and things like that.
She ought to do that.
Absolutely.
So the stories aren't lost.
It's, before it's lost, yeah. Well, I think it's been an interesting adventure today, really quite diverse.
Absolutely. Lovely, absolutely fascinating.
In your
What, you got a suggestion of another diversion you might take us on one evening?
Me?
Yes, you can work on that.
Up with something.
Take us round another cemetery or something.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking that they walk that I'm doing, but it doesn't have any connections to the city of London.
Well, I'll tell you something that's interesting, and it's a shame that Edgar's gone, is the famous connection between the Molam family and Molum, as in the construction people.
Oh, then, right.
That built the City of London. They paved it with Purbeck stone from Swanage.
Yeah.
And a lot of the buildings that were refurbished in London, when they took pieces away to rebuild, they put them in Swanage. The original portico, for instance, of Mercer's Hall, when it was refurbished, is now in Swanage. I think it's either the church hall or one of the civic buildings. And had they not removed the original portico, it would have been destroyed by a bomb in World War II, because it had just been finished when World War II happened, and it would have been destroyed and lost. It's absolutely stunning. I'll send you some papers to read. It might whet your appetite.
Okay. Well, let me put my head together. Would anybody be interested in a Chelsea talk?
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
A Bluebell girl.
Sorry?
A Bluebell girl.
Yeah.
Yes. Why not?
You know, the aesthetes, you know, sort of the bohemian artists of Tite Street, which I'm doing the length of Tite Street, which is not a very long street. And there are so many people there: Whistler, Sargent, Augustus John. I mean, you know, it's unbelievable. Oscar Wilde. And it's like, my real challenge when I do this walk is to not spend 2 hours walking along that stretch just talking about the people there. But, you know, there's, so, you know, it doesn't have any connection to the city, but I have got photos. I could put that together as a fun talk.
Yeah,
it sounds fantastic. Why not? Let's do it.
All right.
It's all about the greater city of London.
Okay.
It's all intermingled one way and another.
Oh, there is at the very end. There's a fantastic connection to the City of London.
Or don't tell us now. Keep it as a secret.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not a tube station.
All right. On that note, I think we'll say goodbye to everybody.
Okay. Back to the drawing board then.
Yes, I think.
Can I just say before we all go, well, thank you very, very much, Rhona.
My pleasure.
I had no idea so many people, well, I knew lots of people were buried. I didn't realize so many interesting people were buried. No, thank you very much. It's fascinating. And Paul, thank you for organizing us,
That's fine.
as always.
Well done, Paul.
We have a very busy day next Thursday. We've got lunch at Savile Club. We've got our first Freeman getting his freedom of the City of London. And we also have Dedalian Glass doing a presentation on their fantastic structural glass, ornamental glass in buildings around the world.
Good grief, we'll need roller skates.
Yes, I think we will.
Oh, this is next Thursday, is it?
This is next Thursday. It's going to be an action-packed.
What hour?
I've got to talk to Joe. I'm going to ask him if he'll do 7 o'clock, because originally we'd said 5, but with everything that's going on, we'll try and put it back till 7.
I may be unable to join you because I have to go up north, and my stepdaughter is finally moving.
Oh.
Make sure she goes.
Well, I'll try and see what we can do. But
I'll try and join it anyway.
See what we can do and where we go from that. But yes, we've got some interesting things coming up on the drawing board. So watch your emails. Yes, Bill.
Rhona, a quick snippet on Tite Street.
Yes.
Before we go.
Don't give more information, but yeah, go on.
Well, it's my uncle, St. John Harmsworth, who was of the Harmsworth family and was a London magistrate, died there of drink in the care of the nuns in Tite Street.
Oh, I know. They do St. Dorothy's.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit for you.
Oh,
Bill, I didn't realise that St. John Harmsworth was a relative of yours.
No.
He was my godfather. He was married to my mother's sister.
I used to appear in front of him very regularly. Very good magistrate.
Didn't we all?
He was very kind to criminals.
He wasn't too bad to
Obviously,
copy,
because Tony didn't get locked up.
But also, he had a drink problem. But you know the film and book, The Cruel Sea.
Yes.
And there was a ship called the Compass Rose.
That's right.
Which both he and Nicholas Montserrat served on.
That's right. Yeah.
And it was, they were sunk, I think, weren't they? And all sorts of dreadful things happened to them. And it was obviously a very dreadful experience. And Nicholas Montserrat turned to drink. And every now and then he used to turn up where my uncle and aunt were living. And he and Uncle Jim would go on a bender for several days.
That sounds about right.
And he drank, he drank most of the family money.
Wow.
Hard luck.
Wow.
I was supposed to be given a silver tea service belonging to my great-great-grandfather, who had the same name, for my wedding. Well, by the time I got married, it had mysteriously disappeared, allegedly stolen, but I think he flogged it for drink.
Probably.
Anyway, once again, it's been a great evening. Thank you. Thank you, Rhona.
Thank you, Rhona.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rhona.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I do have to leave you. I have another Teams call to join.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, good night and have a pleasant
Good night.
evening.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.